Good afternoon or good evening, depending on who you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Wednesday, May the 26th, 2021. There was a report on transsexualism on CBS's 60 Minutes on Sunday, which has caused a furor. Why? Because apparently some people who have gone through the transition regret it now. This phenomenon has been known for decades, but it has been suppressed. And in fact, to even speak of the existence of this phenomenon is to risk serious trouble. I was thinking today about why transsexualism has become an epidemic, particularly female-to-male transsexualism. And I think a large part of the reason is, well, mimesis to begin with, but also because children are no longer socialized, raised by their parents anymore. Typically, when they reach the age of puberty or close to it, they are abandoned to the media, to the internet, and to their peers. I think there's two reasons for this. The first one is that it's not considered quite right anymore for adults to interfere in their children's lives. Apparently, children are supposed to be sovereign. They're supposed to be able to do whatever it is they want to do. I think the other reason is laziness and diffidence on behalf of parents. If you watch one of these old shows like Leave It to Beaver, you'll find that Ward spends an awful lot of his free time talking to his two boys about their problems. So if you eliminate all that time spent with your children talking about their problems, that gives you a lot more free time for your own, to play Minecraft or whatever it is that you want to do. This is from the Daily Mail. Jennifer Smith, CBS is standing by a recent episode of 60 Minutes, which highlighted the stories of transgender teens who say they were rushed to transition and now regret it amid complaints from furious alphabet people activists who say it shouldn't have aired. The episode featured detransitioners, people who had started taking hormones to change their gender within a few months of identifying as trans. All of them said they'd learned about becoming trans on the internet. Leslie Stahl, the veteran CBS journalist who led the episode, laid out how the teens can be easily taken advantage of by greedy doctors who were eager to perform reassignment surgeries, and how they might have been influenced by the liberal left tech industry, which is constantly pushing the issue on today's youth. After the episode aired, she appeared in a bonus segment called 60 Minutes Overtime, where Stahl defended her report. She also took heat from a trans rights lawyer who claimed her story could stigmatize and further marginalize suicidal trans youth if it was taken out of context. Stahl also heard from doctors and psychologists who said they were concerned about the number of surgeons popping up, offering to perform gender reassignment surgery to meet demand without anyone checking their credentials. They said they were scared to speak up for fear of looking like they don't support trans rights. We see that even Andrew Sullivan has got in this debate. He has castigated GLAAD, which is the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Discrimination, saying that this GLAAD's position on this is irresponsible and damaging to young people, and that people should not give money to GLAAD. The American Civil Liberties Union has got involved in this, attacking 60 Minutes because the public shouldn't know about things like that, because the experts have decided that the sexual mutilation of children is a wonderful, wonderful thing. They get to join glitter families. That's actually what they call them. That's a term I learned from Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage, which I reviewed on the book club a few months ago, and which has my highest recommendation. Back to the Daily Mail, the people Stahl interviewed said that they had been rushed into it and now regretted it. One young woman, Grace Ladinsky Smith, was granted a double mastectomy after just 4 months. Garrett, a young man from Louisiana, was castrated after just 3 months of taking female hormones. I didn't get enough pushback on transitioning. I went for 2 appointments, and after the second one, I had my letter to go get on cross-sex hormones, Garrett said. He said he became suicidal after starting the process and not before, as some of Stahl's critics have claimed. I had never really been suicidal until I had my breast augmentation, and about a week afterwards, I wanted to actually kill myself. I had a plan, and I was going to do it, but I kept thinking about my family to stop myself. It kind of felt like, how am I ever going to feel normal again like other guys now? Ladinsky Smith told Stahl in another clip, we only did a few sessions. They asked me, so why do you want to go on testosterone? And I said, well, being a woman just isn't working for me anymore. And they said, okay. She said she then immediately underwent a surgery, but felt wrong. Ladinsky Smith said she had been searching the internet feeling depressed in her early 20s when she came across transgender online communities. And when I saw them being so happy and excited about doing this wonderful transformative process to really become their true selves, I was like, have I ever considered that this could be my situation too? Yes, as the saying goes, wherever you find yourself, that's where you are. You cannot fix your depression, your problems with one weird trick, whatever that trick might be. Dr. Laura Edwards-Leeper, a psychologist, told Leslie Stahl she was deeply concerned about what was going on, but was afraid to speak out about it for fear of being accused of transphobia. It greatly concerns me where the field has been going. I feel like what is happening is unethical and irresponsible in some places. Quote, everyone is very scared to speak up because we're afraid of not being seen as being affirming, gender affirmative. That's the term. And all physicians are required to be gender affirmative now, or being supportive of these young people, or doing something to hurt the trans community. But even some of the providers are trans themselves and share these concerns. Yes, and let's see. Let's look at some of the complaints. Jack Turbin, MD, who has a rainbow flag on his Twitter account, and there's a picture of presumably him and another man both kissing a large dog. He describes himself as a child psychiatry fellow and a Samoyed dog, trans youth mental health research. Yes, and what does he have to say? When I spoke with 60 Minutes about their detransition story, and detransition is put in scare quotes, and asked where they found the people to profile, they refused to tell me and became defensive. We still don't know if they searched for people on turf forums, and transparency would be appreciated. Someone called Dave Cobbett Dave responded, given his keen interest in transparency, I'm sure Dr. Turbin will want everyone to know that he has received at least $15,000 from Arbor Pharmaceuticals, manufacturers of Triptodur, a puberty blocker. This is big, big, big money. Someone who calls himself Chase Strangio, yes, he, him, or they, them, with a picture of a kitten for his banner and a very strange picture of himself. He is very, very angry about this. He says, 60 Minutes, Leslie Stahl, Alexandra Poulos, and Colette Richards knew exactly the harm they were causing with last night's segment. They knew it was the wrong movement and a dangerous, unaccountable, and limited angle, but they did it anyway. That's all on you. This is pure projection. Dangerous, unaccountable? Well, that would apply to the trans medical movement. 12-year-old girl feels unsure of her place in the world, feels unsure about her female identity, goes on the internet or talks to a friend and discovers, well, what do you know? I am really a boy. So let's start those hormones, which, by the way, freeze physical and mental development at the age at which the hormones are taken, and let's start mutilating my body. Does that sound dangerous and unaccountable to anyone else? It certainly does to me. Tucker Carlson has weighed in on this. Again, this is Harriet Alexander from the Daily Mail. American youngsters are being pushed towards extreme sexual therapies and gender realignment surgery by a daily barrage of online content promoted by big technology firms, Tucker Carlson has argued. He opened his show on a Tuesday by discussing Sunday's episode of 60 Minutes. Carlson noted how the young people interviewed by Stahl all said they had learned about transgender surgery and identity on the internet and were influenced by the forums and communities online. They see a daily barrage of propaganda, most of it online, made possible by Google and Facebook, he said. That propaganda has a very specific effect as intended. Carlson said that it was designed to normalize the feelings of gender dysphoria, which he said were relatively uncommon until the internet age. And he told his viewers that statistics showed the drastic surgical options frequently led to further unhappiness. Gender reassignment surgery and chemical castration cause depression and exacerbate mental illness, he said, pointing to a study 5 years ago under the Obama administration, which he said found no positive health benefits. In a 2016 document called Proposed Decision Memo for Gender Dysphoria and Gender Reassignment Surgery, Obama officials concluded that, quote, based on a thorough review of the clinical evidence available at this time, there is not enough evidence to determine whether gender reassignment surgery improves health outcomes for Medicare beneficiaries with gender dysphoria. But no, again, we have all decided, apparently, well, the elite has decided that the sexual mutilation of children is a wonderful thing. Carlson lamented the ease with which young people can receive gender-changing treatment. He quoted Joe Biden from an October 2020 town hall to suggest that Biden backed surgery. He suggested that children as young as 8 can change their sex. Biden did indeed say he supported children being able to live as a different sex, but he did not mention surgery. Biden told the town hall, the idea that an 8-year-old child or a 10-year-old child decides, you know, I decided I want to be transgender. That's what I think I'd like to do. It would make my life a lot easier. There should be zero discrimination. How about the discrimination against the people who enable this? Carlson said the process was too easy. Therapists will steer those kids to doctors who will almost immediately give them powerful sex hormones whose long-term effects we can't know. In some cases, those kids will then be referred to surgeons who will mutilate or remove their sex organs permanently. This is happening across the country tonight. We rarely talk about the details of any of it. It's all good, we're told. It's all part of a vital, long overdue process of personal liberation. And if you stand in the way or ask too many questions, you're evil. Carlson praised Leslie Stahl for a remarkably brave piece of journalism. There's a story by Dr. Susan Berry at Breitbart about this, and there is a picture of a famous transsexual named Laverne Cox, although I'm assured that this person is famous. 60 Minutes highlights transgender people who have decided to transition. I'm sure it won't be seen as controversial in the least, says Jason Rance on KTTH radio. The aforementioned actor and Alphabet People activist Laverne Cox condemned the 60 Minutes segment, asking in an Instagram video Monday, where's the love for trans people? I famously said in 2014 to Katie Couric, yes, it's an interview that everyone has memorized, that when we focus on surgery and transition, when we talk with and about trans people, that objectifies trans people, and that is fundamentally dehumanizing. It's funny that so many of these trans kids go on the internet and talk obsessively about the various stages of their transitioning and their top and bottom surgery, as it's called. They don't seem to consider it fundamentally dehumanizing. Yes. So yeah, let's go to famous transsexuals to talk about this. Yeah, we could go to famous sufferers from anorexia nervosa and ask them about their self-treatment and how they're still, too heavy, how they still find themselves disgustingly fat. The aforementioned GLAAD said, furthermore, failing to disclose that a person profiled in the story is the president of a group that actively seeks to limit affirming transition-related healthcare is poor journalism and a disservice to viewers. It continued, 60 Minutes heard concerns from several trans leaders, and after spending months on the segment, they delivered a piece which still promulgates the same anti-trans dog whistles that we hear from anti-alphabet people activists and in state legislatures like Arkansas. Boo! Arkansas. Similarly, Equality North Carolina tweeted left-wing Jezebel's story with the headline, 60 Minutes segment about Republican attacks on trans kids was itself an attack on trans kids. No, it was not an attack on trans kids. It was very much an attack on those people who enable the sexual mutilation of children. This is what we are talking about here. And yes, sexual mutilation of children. Well, Kellogg's, the cereal manufacturer, they are fully on board. This is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. Kellogg's has launched a special gay pride cereal that encourages buyers to choose the pronouns of characters such as Toucan Sam. Yes, really. Friend sent this to me. I had no idea that Tony the Tiger and Toucan Sam were dating, tweeted Dave Rubin. The images show the result of a collaboration between Kellogg Company and Alphabet People lobby group, Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation GLAAD, with $3 from every purchase going to the organization. $3? How much are they selling this cereal for? Together with Pride Cereal, marks the latest chapter in a years-long partnership with GLAAD and is the evolution of the much-loved All Together cereal, which no one had heard of until yesterday, which previously was only available online, said Doug Vandeveld, general manager of Kellogg U.S. cereal category. Our delicious new recipe features berry-flavored rainbow hearts dusted with edible glitter. We can't wait for fans to try our latest limited run. Kellogg's added that the marketing ploy was part of their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, while GLAAD president and CEO Sarah Kate Ellis said the partnership will create opportunities for homes and families to have conversations about the importance of acceptance, compassion, and understanding, especially when it comes to alphabet people youth. Alex Jones was right, tweeted in response, they're turning the frogs gay. Skittles is also giving up its rainbow colors for Pride Month, turning the candy gray and donating money to GLAAD. Apparently, the Alphabet People movement now owns the rainbow itself. Maybe their next target will be the electromagnetic spectrum, which is rumored to be ambivalent about drag queen story time and therefore problematic. Yes, the rainbow. The rainbow, of course, is the symbol of the promise that God made to Noah. And it has been hijacked and perverted by people who, among other things, cheer for the sexual mutilation of children. What are we going to hear next from the cereal companies? That Captain Crunch is a furry, or perhaps that Count Chocula is a real vampire? I don't know. Is vampirism on the Alphabet People spectrum yet? I'm sure it's just a matter of time. As Summit News documents in a video attached, the Alphabet People has become so intertwined with giant corporations exploiting it for lame, meaningless virtue signaling and free product placement that the two are inseparable. Given that it's supported by every major company, cultural institution, media outlet, social media network, and government entity in the West, one wonders how they can still claim to be oppressed and what exactly they are fighting against now that they're pushing against an open door. GLAAD was founded as a protest against defamatory coverage of alphabet people in 1985. In 2021, people who engage in such defamatory coverage or merely refuse to bake a gay pride cake are publicly shamed, deplatformed, attacked, fired, sued in court, or a combination of all five. Who is really doing the oppressing and who is being oppressed at this point? Well, yes, as I've been saying for decades, all slippery slope warnings turn out to be true. Kellogg's is grooming America's children for reasons, I suppose, which have to remain mysterious. Let's go to the chat. Chad Chazin, our valiant moderator, thank you for your service, says right on time as usual. Hello to Professor Paul and Palcasso 88, Ed McNeck, Dan, and a Tricky Who. Chokokin 666 says, if you've ever read the post-surgery threads, you will see that a number of the surgeons are butchers. I have dipped my toe, as it were, into that. You have been warned. It is absolutely disgusting and is liable to infuriate you, perhaps to a dangerous level. Anran says, I didn't agree with what Abigail Schreier wrote on Al Campanis in her Cancel Culture article. I came across that. I haven't read it yet. Tricky Who says, these people care about their inverted agenda over the lives of children. Gamma Yun says, wow, sounds psychopathic. Adam says, is speaking out enough? Shouldn't we be doing something about the normalization of the sexual mutilation of children? Well, I mean, we could start by using that term. If you ever come across a politician, your local representative, or someone from the city council, ask them, preferably in public, why they are in favor of the sexual mutilation of children. Jim Smith says, I don't know what Schreier wrote on Al Campanis, but it wouldn't surprise me if she was liberal on matters other than the trans issue. She doesn't seem to me to be that liberal, actually. Claire Caw says, hardly any fathers in homes to defend a child's sex organs in the West now. They spoke to actual trans people, says Chogoken 666, but they have become people. Jim Bowden says, hi, KMG. I've missed you for the last 2 to 3 weeks. What happened? I was kicked off the air by YouTube for a week. That is what happened. Steve says, sometimes I feel like I'm under attack from every direction. Look, I don't think that the trans agenda is very popular. More to the point, most of the people who say that they support it, their support is lukewarm, and they're only indicating support because they're afraid that lack of support would get them into trouble. Meanwhile, the people on the other side of this issue are absolutely enraged. That is to say, one of the problems with polling is that it doesn't mention intensity. Oh, yes, I talked about a certain senator asking embarrassing questions of a certain sainted American doctor, and I will be talking about this sainted American doctor, and he's just all over the place now. Metal Mike says, I remember when Transformers was only a cartoon. Emma Nimpton says, I don't have the stomach to look at those threads. Yes, I fully understand that, but I've explained the problem before. Without getting into the gory and disgusting details, if people don't know about this, or they don't even have a clue what they are, they're liable to say, what's the fuss all about? These are happy stories for these poor children. Now, of course, any 12 or 13-year-old who says, say to her mother and father, if you don't let me mutilate my body, I will kill myself. that person is deeply disturbed. Deeply disturbed. This is a terrorist threat. And the response of parents should be, we do not negotiate with terrorists. Oh dear, Jim Bowden. Tricky, who says anecdotal, but all my children are happily married and have happy, loving homes. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Chogakin666 says there are photos. There is a Jazz Jennings. One of the cable companies made Jazz a star, and everyone loves Jazz. And Jazz's transition has not been very successful physically. I mean, no. And I don't want to go into the details, but let's say that certain parts of the body were repurposed in Jazz's case. Excretory parts of the body were repurposed, which leads to certain problems, as one might imagine. So, moving on to Canada, and one sees the power of the regime media here. This is not an issue that many people care about. Members of a particularly strong pressure group care about it. But I suppose Canadians don't have a very long memory. Years after promising to do so, this is by Rachel Aiello at CTV News, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said during Pride Month last June that he hoped to very soon announce the elimination of the blood donation ban for gay men, as well as some other folks in the alphabet people community. It's nearly a year later, and the policy remains unchanged, with the government now arguing in federal court that while they want to see the blood ban eliminated, it's not within their powers to unilaterally change the policy. Opposition parties and that would include Canada's Conservative Party, have begun increasing the political pressure to see the Liberals do more to make good on their two-time election commitment as alphabet people advocates, and those who are prohibited from donating continue to voice their frustration, saying the policy is discriminatory and not based in science. Well, it is discriminatory. There's no question about that. The last time that homosexual men were allowed to donate blood in Canada, this was in the 1980s, a lot of people died from HIV or AIDS and hepatitis. Yes, but no. We would sooner risk this happening again than offend angry homosexuals. In Canada, both the Canadian Blood Services, yes, the Canadian Blood Services, blood donations used to be handled by the Canadian Red Cross, but the Canadian Red Cross so botched this during the AIDS epidemic. Specifically, one thing that the Canadian Red Cross did, was despite the fact that it had reserves of blood known to be HIV-free, the Canadian Red Cross decided to expend its stocks of poisoned blood. Yes, they actually did that. Guess what? No one went to prison because this is Canada. So, Canadian Blood Services and Hema-Quebec have policies in place prohibiting gay and bisexual men who have sex with men, as well as certain trans folks, that word again, who have sex with men from donating blood unless they have been abstinent for 3 months. The policy started in 1992 as an outright lifetime ban following the tainted blood scandal that played out between the 1980s and 90s. Yes, but let's risk that again. And of course, Erin O'Toole, the oh-so-conservative leader of the Conservative Party, has a openly gay MP who is pushing for the end of this ban, and Erin O'Toole has decided that he is fully on board. So now the Conservative Party can argue that the Liberals are the real homophobes. TV is gay. It's been gay for decades. There's a story about this from someone called Casper Salmon in The Guardian. No More Bite, How Netflix Defanged Ryan Murphy. Apparently, Ryan Murphy is no longer, gay enough? He begins bow down before the towering chutzpah of Ryan Murphy, who in just 4 years has made Feud, Hollywood the Prom, The Boys in the Band, Ratched, 2 seasons of The Politician, and 3 apiece of American Crime Story and Pose, and 4 of American Horror Story for making a show, but a talented gay man whose mistake was to spread himself thin. Yes, Murphy has made his TV show again, this time about the fashion designer Halston, played by Ewan McGregor, whose clothes were everywhere in the 1970s and who was himself in the Studio 54 crowd. Eventually, he fatally diluted his brand by trying to be everything to everyone, signing a deal with JCPenney to mass market his designs, which put paid to his high-end business. And guess which word does not appear in this story? AIDS. Wow. A whole bunch of homosexual men died horribly in the 1980s and 1990s. How did this come about? No, we don't want to talk about that because it might make some people feel bad. Murphy's shtick in Halston, as well as in his other Netflix material, is to provide fabulous content that may lend itself to binging. In line with his trademark style, there are glam costumes, tall, brown-haired, handsome male actors who are up for a bit of objectification. This is a homosexual man who was using that word unironically. Older women in lurid hats, a smattering of bon mots. But crucially, binge-watching seems to rob Murphy's show of their singularity and bite. Each one appears disposable and undercooked, where they seek to be powerfully resonant. His Netflix work is a far cry and a noticeable change in tone from his trashy zenith when he was making TV for FX, which, among other things, saw him enlist Lady Gaga as a bloodthirsty witch of the woods called Scathatch. The new stuff offers a coolly revisionist take on some aspect of gay or gay-adjacent culture. It is here that Murphy falters as high camp is sunk by a surfeit of sincerity. Yes. To his credit, however, according to Casper Salmon, Murphy offers up a tolerable amount of gay sex in Halston, but it is always counterbalanced by a weirdly lecturing bent which sees Halston's lover, the hilarious name Victor Hugo, moan to Halston that he wants to be a couple. Really, that feels like a leap. Oh, and there's a troublesome reference here to apparently homosexuals paying for sex with black men. Yeah, I don't think it serves Casper Salmon's purpose to lift up that rock and see what is underneath. It appears that this Casper Salmon fellow is something in the media world. He describes himself as writer, critic, impish rogue, queer socialist, very handsome, commission me or ask me out, and then he gives his email address, he, him, I guess, and then there is a rainbow flag. And so, yes, in a story that he wrote last year, we see that Casper Salmon was one of the early adopters of woke. What's all this talk about woke? All this talk about woke is nonsense. Does anyone outside of Twitter really care about films being woke? Well, apparently they did with the Star Wars films, the last 2, because they stayed away in large numbers. And it's tokenism. Representation is a fraud. Alphabet people, representation is a fraud, according to Salmon. It's never enough. Repeat after me, the woke left is not winning this fight. Beyond all this, the idea that art is now subject to a tyrannical sort of moral inquisition is an idea that refuses to die. Golly, I wonder why that might be. The most alarming part of it all is the implicit belief that art can or even should be divorced from politics. Why is it so hard to accept that poor people in politics, in other words, a failure to do right by people, show kindness to characters, represent people fairly, can in themselves be an artistic failing? How do we reach a situation where people truly believe art and politics to be discrete forces, the latter not to be considered in an honest appraisal a former. Yeah, anyone familiar with that show Glee of a few years ago? You ever check out what happened to so many of the people who appeared on Glee? They came to bad ends. I wonder why that might be. Yes, and there's more on this subject from this fellow. Apparently, it is really important. It is really, really important to get rid of period dramas. Why might that be? Because the film industry will stay racist and sexist until we drop period dramas. I don't know about that. The BBC, I believe it's the BBC, is now presenting Anne Boleyn, no less, as a white, dark-skinned black woman. We know what Anne Boleyn looked like because she was painted, and she is not black, and not in her physiognomy, not in her coloring. She is rather pale, in fact, as was her sister, Mary Boleyn. And we have pictures of Anne Boleyn by several famous artists, including by Hans Holbein the Younger. And this is clearly not a black woman. But he who controls the past controls the future. And the English are having their past stolen from them and perverted. Oh, yes. Yes, and this fellow, Casper Salmon, very, very upset that Star Wars was not gay enough for him. Just not gay enough. And apparently Hollywood is white supremacist. Yeah, because they keep telling stories about white people. Yeah, how about that? It's a new definition of white supremacy to me. There's a piece, it seems that the Democrats are beginning to worry about wokeness. And Biden having been installed in the White House, it might be time to, I don't know, dial it down a little. Is wokeness kryptonite for Democrats, asks Thomas Edsel in the New York Times today. As Republicans well know, Democrats are divided on a host of volatile racial, cultural, and sexual issues. Take a look at the polls. In 2019, the Democracy Fund Voter Study Group commissioned a survey asking for agreement or disagreement with the statement, there are only two genders, male and female. In the full sample, a decisive majority, 59% agreed, including 43% who strongly agreed. 32% disagreed, and 9% said that they weren't sure. Among Republicans, it was no contest. 78% agreed and 16% disagreed. Independents mirrored the whole sample. Democrats were split, a plurality, 48% disagreed and 44% agreed. The survey itself arguably embodied what critics call transphobic framing. Transgender issues are among the most polarizing in contemporary politics, and much contemporary cultural conflict, in fact, stems from framing disputes. Oh, you see, we're not sexually mutilating children. No. How dare you use that framing? We are being gender affirmative and allowing these newly minted boys and girls to join their glorious, to reject their biological families and to join their new fabulous glitter families. And again, I am not making this up. Edsel continues, although centrist Democrats make up a majority of the party in the polls I cited above, the fact that a substantial minority of Democrats takes the more extreme stance allows Republicans to portray the Democratic Party as very much enthralled to its more, quote, radical, unquote, wing. Nadine Strawson, professor emerita at New York Law School and former president of the ACLU, wrote by email that she considers herself a bleeding heart liberal, but even more important to me are the classic liberal values that are under siege from all sectors of the political spectrum, left to right, including freedom of speech, thought and association, academic freedom, due process, and personal privacy. Yes, it's the right, obviously, just as much as the left, which is responsible for this. There are, of course, according to Edsel, plenty of people who sharply defend the progressive wing of the Democratic coalition. Elizabeth Rose, a law student, argued, for example, in defense of cancel culture last year, that for all the condemnations on cancel culture as an un-American speech-suppressing monster, I would argue that cancel culture is incredibly American. You see how this goes? It always goes in this manner. Cancel culture, what are you talking about? That this is conspiracy theory. It's disinformation spread by the right. And eventually we get to a position, I love cancel culture. Cancel culture is wonderful. This is what happened with the deep state. Deep state, what are you, some sort of kook? Conspiracy theorist? Spreading disinformation? There's no such thing as the deep state. And last year we started to hear from high-ranking so-called intelligence officials, yes, there is a deep state, and the deep state, members of the deep state are heroes, America's greatest heroes, because they are blocking Donald Trump. That apparently is the highest duty of people who work in the FBI and the CIA and other alphabet agencies to neglect or simply ignore orders from the President of the United States. My own view is that eventually, of course, that identity politics leads to the war of all against all and is unsustainable. But again, it's a question of passion. And the people who believe in intersectionality, they have the passion and the ability to wear down their opponents among liberals in the Democratic Party, because they will just shout and shout and shout and shout until they get their way. Jonathan Haidt, a social psychologist at New York University, argued in an email that the policies the Democratic Party's left wing is pushing are an anchor weighing down the party's prospects. Quote, wokeness is kryptonite for the Democrats. Most people hate it, other than the progressive activists. If you just look at Americans' policy preferences, Dems should be winning big majorities. But we have strong negative partisanship, and when people are faced with a party that seems to want to defund the police and rename schools rather than open them, all while crime is rising and kids' welfare is falling, the left flank of the party is just so easy for Republicans to run against. James Carville, former top strategist for Bill Clinton, recently told a Vox writer, wokeness is a problem and everyone knows it. It's hard to talk to anybody today, and I talk to lots of people in the Democratic Party who doesn't say this, but they don't want to say it out loud. Why not? Because they'll get clobbered. The Republican Party could use this issue to forge a majority, a coalition, but I suspect that they're too stupid to do so. Speaking of misinformation, disinformation, this is from last month. I didn't come across it until today, and it made me gasp. How to Save Ourselves from Disinformation, a New York Times event. The Times' Kevin Roose, Shira Frankel, and Davey Alba combined with the comedian Sarah Silverman to explore how disinformation spreads and how we can fight back. Back in 2016, Sarah Silverman famously or infamously declared that Donald Trump was, quote, worse than Hitler, unquote. That would count as disinformation. Would it not? How many millions of people did Donald Trump kill? How many countries did he invade? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But somehow the New York Times finds nothing risible in the notion of bringing on Sarah Silverman as an expert on disinformation. I suppose, her heart is in the right place. That's the way they look at it. Sarah Silverman is the kind of person who normal people hate. They might remember her as that kind of cute person who was on television some decades back. Every time you have heard from Sarah Silverman in the last few years, she has been pretty much screaming at people. While we're on the subject of cancel culture, a dreary story from Canada by Tasha Carridden. O'Toole gets last laugh over progressives' tempest in a beer can. Poor Aaron O'Toole just can't catch a break. On Friday night, the Conservative Party leader tweeted a snap of himself in a ball cap and sweaty blue t-shirt holding a can of Legion Lager, captioned, "Starting the long weekend off right. Rebecca had a cold one waiting for me after my run, wishing everyone a safe and relaxing long weekend." Well, the very idea that Aaron O'Toole has a wife who is willing to have a cold beer waiting for him when he gets home, I don't really understand that. Did she deliver it to him personally? Did she pour it in a glass and hand it to him when he opened the door, or did he just open the fridge and take one out? But keeping women suppressed and controlled starts in the home. Be careful. Misogyny at its best. You guys still in the 50s. Is this part of the Make Him More Relatable campaign? Because it's not working. Well, of course, instead of doubling down against these hateful people, what Aaron O'Toole did do was he ran another tweet serving his wife a glass of rosé, which he misspelt. And you see, he does things for his wife, and he gave her some flowers too, because I have to make up for my very controversial statement that my wife got a beer for me. A couple of years ago, Hockey Night in Canada fired Don Cherry, broadcasting legend, after he had complained that Asians in this country typically do not wear poppies to honor Remembrance Day, November 11th, which is Veterans Day in the United States. For my American and other foreign listeners, Remembrance Day in Canada is close to being Canada's real official national holiday. It was actually a liberal writer for the Toronto Star who pointed this out decades ago. Our national holiday is called Canada Day. Yes, happy generic national holiday day. It used to be called Dominion Day, referring to the Dominion status which Canada received from the British Empire in 1867. I believe there was no one in Parliament, 30 people in Parliament. No one knew about this, and this was rushed through because we can't have a reference to how Canada actually came about. Remembrance Day, of course, is a celebration of Canada's soldiers. I mean, well, the soldiers that served in the First and Second World War, primarily. But on Wednesday night, during coverage of the 2021 NHL playoffs, Ron MacLean made a quip that led to outrage on social media as it was perceived to be homophobic. Of course, Ron MacLean famously threw his longtime broadcasting partner and supposed friend, Don Cherry, to the wolves over this comment about poppies. A video of the joke with the caption, "Fire Ron MacLean by Pride Month, thanks." So it's Pride Month now? I thought July or June was supposed to be Pride Month. Every month is Pride Month, I suppose. It's been viewed over 100,000 times on Twitter by time of publication. Addressing analyst Kevin Bieksa, while wrapping up a segment, MacLean said, "You have a photo of a man with his tarp off. You're definitely positive for something." I have no idea what that could mean. After the comment, MacLean's co-host Jennifer Botterill winced as MacLean tried to throw to commercial. Matt Campbell, and who's he when he's at home? He's a film connoisseur and sportster from Montreal. He may be a musician as well, but he was terribly upset. With today being about the fight for racial equality in the NHL, Ron MacLean saw fit to perpetuate homophobia on national TV and said, "Incredibly disappointing, but honestly, not surprising." The comment was interpreted by many on social media as a joke, suggesting that Bieksa is attracted to men and has AIDS. Okay, well, he promptly apologized or indicated. This is a breaking story, you understand. Again, from the post-millennial, Alphabet People activist says Ron MacLean was apologetic after homophobic joke. MacLean has not yet made a public comment despite increasing calls for his reputation. And there's a photo. The illustration is a picture of McLean and presumably this Botterill women, both posing with hockey sticks where the blade is a rainbow, because there's nothing gayer than hockey, apparently. Such is the state of Canadian culture. And this is from Extra. Bardish Shagger, our voice at the cabinet table. Extra asks Canada's Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and Youth about the millions of dollars set aside for alphabet people policy and funding in last month's federal budget. Yeah, how about that? Elected in 2015 in Waterloo, Ontario, and appointed minister in 2019, Shagger's role is, in large part, to represent queer and trans communities at the cabinet table. She's also in charge of the government's anti-racism strategy. Right off the top, Shagger praises her government's actions when it comes to Canada's alphabet people communities, etc., etc. Yes, we have an alphabet people secretariat in my joke of a country. And of course, we also have a minister of diversity and inclusion and youth in my benighted country. Let's go back to the chat, see what is going on there. Don Willis says hanging in the public square should be an option if we ever take back power. Yes, Metal Mike says every month is Pride Month. BLM flags, yes, I'll get to that in just a minute. Don Willis says Don Cherry, grapes, did nothing wrong, a Canadian treasure. Yes, Don Cherry has done a great deal of work over decades for the Canadian Legion, which represents Canadians veterans, and they threw him under the bus. The Canadian Legion. Don McLean caved to the woke, and the woke will have him for breakfast anyway, sooner or later, says Metal Mike. Aslan makes a joke. I think my keyboard is homophobic. It says queerty on the top row. My favorite minister, says Gamma Yun. Yes, someone called Bardish Shagger. Apart from being a sprog, I don't know what it was, she 28 years old or something. Yeah, it's a cabinet minister in my country. I bought a Canadian Legion watch, but it's made in China. Never again, says Metal Mike. Aslan says Don Cherry was an amazing avant-garde jazz musician. Yes, Steve Saylor was writing about that. There was also a popular singer called Don Cherry in the 1950s. Aslan says Anglosphere has some of the world's dumbest smart people living in denial. Well, that is certainly true. She was cute back in her Larry Sanders days, says Ann Run. Yes, and I suppose making up for her diminished lack of cuteness, she never misses an opportunity to pose naked or near naked. Seth Rogen is all about cancel culture, mostly to avoid being called out as a sex pest. Yeah, his friendship with Franco, the actor. Oh, no, I'm not friends with Franco. You're not? Really? You're not working with him still? And you discovered that James Franco was a sex pest when this has been common knowledge for the better part of a decade? Again, from Metal Mike, so Trudeau has more sense on this than the Conservatives. Spooky. The 19th Amendment was more destructive than the Civil War, it says Head McNeck. I feel bad for Jazz, just a kid who got tricked into destroying its life, says Head McNeck. Okay. And I suspect Anglosphere suffers from terminal passive aggression directed inward, says Aslan. We're still on. Oh, how about that? How about that for a segue? From The Hill, Seth Rogen on cancel culture. If you've made a joke that's aged terribly, accept it. You mean like all of Seth Rogen's joke? I'm stoned. I'm so stoned. There's not really a joke there, is there? Watch stoned people do stupid things. Watch stoned people talk stupidly. Watch stoned people eat a lot of junk food. Watch stoned vegetables have sex with each other in a movie. Talk about sex, having sex with each other in a movie. Yes, this movie was actually green-lighted and released. It's called Food Fight or something like this. Seth Rogen dismissed the risks posed to comedians by cancel culture in today's society during an interview with Good Morning Britain this week, saying he thinks comics should own up to making remarks that don't age well. Jokes are not things that are necessarily built to last. Well, you first, Rogan. You first. His remarks come as conservatives have increasingly ramped up their criticism of instances of political and media figures facing professional or other consequences for actions or remarks considered offensive by some. You mean like Donald Glover, Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock? Are they all conservatives then? I don't think so. On Tuesday, former contributor Rick Santorum invoked the phrase while explaining his firing from CNN over comments about Native Americans that the network's president, Jeff Zucker, and others said were racist in nature. What Santorum, I'm no fan of Rick Santorum, what he had to say on that subject was absolutely true. But truth is not a defense. Okay. Dr. F. What the F is going on with this guy? Does anyone have any idea what his position on the coronavirus and where it originated is? Is anyone certain about this? Does it change from week to week, from day to day, from hour to hour, perhaps? This is from Wendell Husebo at Breitbart. Dr. F admitted Tuesday the National Institutes of Health funded the Wuhan lab, but he still denies gain of function support. F told the House Appropriations Subcommittee that the funds were given to the Chinese lab through the EcoHealth Alliance to support a modest collaboration with very respectable Chinese scientists who were world experts on coronavirus. Dr. F, the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, also continued to deny funding gain of function research, articulating that process to be taking a virus that could infect humans and making it either more transmissible and or pathogenic for humans. That categorically was not done. That categorically was not done by whom? Where? Senator Rand Paul claimed Tuesday that Dr. Gloom committed perjury May the 12th over his gain of function comments related to Communist China's Wuhan lab. He was asked, do you believe that F perjured himself? Absolutely, he lied to the American people, Paul explained. There was gain of function research going on with Dr. Shi Zhengli at the Wuhan Institute. In her paper, she actually thanked Dr. F and the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which is part of the National Institutes of Health that Dr. F runs. It's listed at the end of the paper. This paper was financed by NIAID Research, and it lists a 10-digit number that identifies the research money she got from the United States. Was it gain of function? Well, it took a SARS virus, which is a coronavirus that's 15 times more deadly than COVID, and added to it S protein, which is something in the surface of it to make it more easily infectious to epithelial cells for the respiratory tract. That, to me, is gain of function. Yes, it's oh, no, I didn't give the money personally. Oh, we gave it to this group who gave it to the lab. And gain of function, no, I wasn't doing that personally. Oh, but in any event, what they were doing is not gain of function. Okay, is that confusing enough? Well, here's a story today from the Post-Millennial. In a Senate hearing today, Dr. F told Senator John Kennedy that he can't guarantee that American taxpayer money didn't go to dangerous gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. F told the Senate committee that he doesn't have enough insight to say whether or not Chinese scientists at the Wuhan Institute would have lied about where NIH funding was going or the origins of COVID-19. He said that Chinese scientists are trustworthy and that he would expect that they would abide by the conditions of the grant, just as, Chinese are famous for, not stealing military secrets or not stealing business secrets, not deliberately seeking proprietary information. They are as ethical as all get out. They are far above that kind of behavior. F says the NIH looks at the published studies from the Wuhan Institute to check what the Institute was up to with the NIH funding. Kennedy also asked Fauci why he stopped the Trump administration's investigation into the origins of COVID-19. F said that he had nothing to do with the investigation being spiked, as Kennedy put it, and that he had no knowledge of the inquiry. NIH Director Dr. Francis Collins said he read about it in the press and was not consulted. Congress is set to increase the NIH's funding by 68%, according to Senator Rand Paul. Paul made a speech on the Senate floor Tuesday attacking the NIH for what he claims is wasteful spending. Paul said the NIH has spent taxpayer dollars researching things like $874,000 to see if Japanese quails are more sexually promiscuous on cocaine. Oh, that sounds a great increase to human knowledge, does it not? And more on this story from the Daily Mail. So who would have shut this down if it wasn't the medical officials? I thought it was the medical officials who were running everything. I thought that, it had to follow the science. Well, according to, again, Harriet Alexander at the Daily Mail, Joe Biden's team shut down a State Department investigation into the Wuhan laboratory as a source of the COVID-19 outbreak, according to a new report on Tuesday night. Last fall, then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo led an investigation to answer whether China's biological weapons program may have played a role in the pandemic, sources told CNN Tuesday. But the probe was met with internal opposition by those concerned it was part of a political effort by the Trump administration to blame China for the virus. And when Biden's team was briefed on the investigation's findings in February and March, they decided to shut it down amid concerns about the legitimacy of the evidence. How about the legitimacy of the evidence, and this has been known for a year, of a U.S. government diplomatic investigation into the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where they looked at the safety procedures employed there and concluded that they were definitely substandard. And you see that these two stories never seem to be joined, because, if you mention the diplomatic investigation, then this, okay, yes, now we understand how it could have gotten out. No, but China must be protected for some reason. And the Canadian government is very much involved in this, and I'll get to that shortly. Okay, this is from Michael Luciano at Mediaite. Fox's John Roberts corrects House Republican in real time on false claim that U.S.-funded research at Wuhan lab. Who's laughing now, Luciano? Has this story been corrected? Or has it been corrected stealthily? And I'll get to that shortly. Dr. Fauci said that he does not mean he believes the virus first emerged in a lab, as some have suggested, says Weijia Jiang. He does not know anything about the 3 researchers at the Wuhan lab who sought hospital care in November 2019, as reported by the Wall Street Journal. And who is Weijia Jiang? Oh, she's CBS News' senior White House correspondent, a Chinese-born West Virginian. All above board, no question. And from the Citizen Free Press, again, yes, Biden spiked COVID origin probe without consulting Fauci. But why? Why wouldn't you consult him? He is Mr. Science. From the Daily Mail, again, Biden now wants U.S. intelligence to investigate the Wuhan lab leak and gives them 90 days to report back after shutting down Pompeo-led probe into theory and dismissing Trump's claims. A string of senior scientists have recently admitted they may have leapt to conclusions in assuming the virus jumped from an animal host in the wild to humans, and are now looking into the theory it leaked from a Wuhan lab that have been dismissed for the last 12 months. At the weekend, fresh details emerged about how staff at the Wuhan Institute sought hospital treatment for COVID-like symptoms in November 2019. The result is that a theory once consigned to fringe websites, championed by the Trump administration and decried by the media, has moved into the mainstream, and Biden aides have ditched their skepticism to call for more investigations. Oh, is that what it was? Skepticism? Or was it simply an attempt to protect China, which of course has nothing to do with the activities of Joe Biden's crackhead, incestuous son, Hunter Biden? Complete coincidence, of course. Let's talk about some shame in the media. This is from Natalie Winters at the National Pulse. Vox stealth edits article debunking COVID lab leak origin theory. Highlighted by left-wing media outlet Vox is secretly revising articles related to the origins of COVID-19, reversing its original stance that the lab leak theory wasn't plausible. Highlighted by computer scientist Paul Graham on Twitter, the changes appear in a Vox article originally published on March the 4th, 2020. The article, "The Conspiracy Theories About the Origins of the Coronavirus Debunked," was revised on March the 12th, 2020, in an effort to backtrack the piece's adamant opposition to the possibility of COVID-19 leaking from the Wuhan Institute. Conspiracy theory. Well, how about what we actually know to be true? The U.S. taxpayer money ended up in the coffers of the Wuhan Institute, a place where research led by the so-called Bat Lady, gain of function, taking deadly viruses and making them deadlier and more transmissible to people. Is that not enough to cause a scandal? To cause, for a call for heads to roll? Apparently not. Apparently not. And so there is evidence in this from Graham. Graham points out the various changes, including swapping out "is" for "appears to be" and deleting "not the Wuhan lab." This is becoming a commonplace in the regime media. No, they're not going to say that they made a mistake. No, they don't want to do that. They'll just make it look like they didn't make a mistake. My old colleague, Lauren Gunter, looked at the Canadian aspect of this a couple of days ago in the Toronto Sun. The Public Health Agency of Canada, the very same outfit behind the federal government's chaotic, often self-contradictory response to the pandemic, will not say whether Zhang Guoqiu and her husband Keding Cheng were Canadian citizens when they worked at the agency's high-security National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg, a Level 4 biocontainment facility. PHAC could tell us, but refuses to do so, citing privacy reasons. The agency simply says that the two were legally permitted to work in this country when they were in the employ of the lab. But how could it be a privacy issue to divulge whether someone is a Canadian? That seems like something you'd want to keep private only if they weren't. What's more, saying someone is legally entitled to work in Canada is a turn of phrase almost always reserved for non-citizens. But these weren't temporary foreign workers slinging donuts and coffee at a drive-through. It is not unfair to wonder whether the PHAC's reluctance to level with Canadians is really an attempt to cover up the possibility that Q and Cheng are Chinese nationals who were working at the heart of Canada's most secretive and sensitive lab. The pair was walked out of the facility in 2019 and fired this past January after CSIS, which is the Canadian equivalent to the CIA, concluded there was a possibility the couple was sharing confidential information with Chinese, and more particularly with the Chinese military. In a report this week in the Globe and Mail, it was revealed that since 2016, 7 researchers from the Special Pathogens Unit of the National Microbiology Laboratory have worked on a total of 6 projects on some of the world's deadliest diseases, in which they conducted experiments with and co-wrote academic papers with Chinese counterparts. The only Chinese scientist to be credited on all 6 projects, Fei Huyan, is a researcher at the, wait for it, People's Liberation Army Academy of Military Medical Sciences. Parliament is supposed to deal with questions like this. The way the parliamentary system is supposed to work is that people ask questions of ministers or the prime ministers and they get answers. Or if the ministers don't have the answers, they are required to bring answers in short order. That doesn't happen anymore and hasn't happened for a long time. Typically what happens is the minister simply refuses to answer the question or sneers at the MP asking the question. And Michael Chong, Conservative MP, who is one of the few decent people in the House of Commons, he asked Canada's Health Minister, Patty Hajdu, about this. He first asked about the 2 scientists, citizenship unknown, who were frog-marched out of the laboratory in Winnipeg. She refused to answer the question, saying, they're no longer employed by that institution, so I have nothing to say. He then brought up what Lorne Gunter had written about. Why are 7 Canadian scientists working with the People's Liberation Army on deadly viruses? She said, this gives me an opportunity to talk about how wonderful this lab is. That was her answer. She simply refused to answer the question. And the Canadian media is not interested in this. If you look at all political stories in the Canadian media, apart from some scandals, a few which are not particularly interesting, it's all who's up, who's down. There was actually an article in the Hill Times today about who were the best backroom boys and girls. They were ranked. Yes, because let's talk about meta. Let's not talk about what's actually happening. For instance, why are Canadian taxpayers paying for China to learn more about how to make deadly viruses even deadlier? So we have both Canada and the United States up to their necks in this. Sounds like a pretty big story to me. I think that this is such a story that I don't think that the regime media is going to be able to get away with crushing it. So a story by David Leonhardt in the New York Times. This morning he writes, I'm going to tell you another story about the Centers for Disease Control and its approach to COVID-19 behavioral guidelines. It's a story that highlights the costs of extreme caution. When Dr. Rochelle Walensky, the CDC director, appeared before a Senate committee this month and defended the agency's description of how often COVID-19 is transmitted outdoors, she cited a single academic study. She was responding to a question from Senator Susan Collins of Maine, who had asked why some CDC guidelines seemed inconsistent with the available data. Collins quoted from that day's edition of this newspaper and argued that the CDC was exaggerating the risk of outdoor activities by claiming that less than 10% of COVID transmission occurred outside. Anything close to 10% would mean that outdoor infections were a huge problem, yet the true share appears to be closer to 0.1%. Walensky replied that the 10% number came from a study published in the Journal of Infectious Diseases. The study was a meta-analysis, she explained, which means it synthesized data from other studies. The top-line result of all studies that were concluded in the systematic review said that less than 10% of cases were transmitted outdoors. Her answer made the study sound definitive. Walensky, I wonder if this was her public appearance where she burst into tears and talked about how scared she was. Walensky did not mention any other studies or offer any logical argument for why she believed outdoor transmission was a significant risk. She implied that the CDC was simply listening to the Journal of Infectious Diseases, which, as she noted, is a top journal. Later that day, One of the study's authors posted several messages on Twitter, and the story got more complicated. Yes, the story got more complicated. That is to say, it got truer. When the New York Times, no less, is beginning to snipe at the experts, the previously unassailable scientists, one gets the impression that there is something in the wind. Oh, yes, someone posted a funny tweet about a mattress, which I will refer to. Just give me a second here. And someone had written something on a mattress. Beware of C-19 vaccine. It's a time bomb that'll explode in 7 months. Well, obviously a conspiracy theory, no question about that. Must be condemned wholly. And someone called Kim Z. Dale responded, "Who are you going to believe, science or this mattress in the alley?" And I responded, "This mattress never bullied anyone into wearing a mask outdoors. It never sneered at the lab leak hypothesis as misinformation, and it never made us terrified of touching any surface when there was no evidence COVID-19 could be transmitted that way." And whenever it talks to you about the science and follow the science, well, the science told us a year ago, and up to about a month ago, when they sheepishly and very quietly moved away from this, we were told that COVID-19 could live on exposed surfaces for up to 9 days. Now, okay, this was obviously nonsense to me right from the very beginning, because if this was going to live for up to 9 days on exposed surfaces, it would mean that very quickly everyone in the world would be exposed to COVID-19. Or are all the doorknobs and banisters and all the myriad of other things that people touch hundreds of times a day, are they all going to be Lysoled every, 10 minutes, 5 minutes? No. So this was obvious nonsense, but it would appear that the purpose of this was to scare us to death and to persuade us that COVID-19 was the biggest crisis to hit the world in decades. And even the Globe and Mail, which has been one of the leaders in panic porn in Canada, is now backing off. This is a story by Serena Maratta, why it's time to stop wiping down groceries and other COVID-19 cleaning measures that don't reduce transmission risk. This was known, admitted, several months ago, but the story was buried. And even today, you see the commercials for Lysol and other things. You see the hand sanitizer. There are some stores that insist that people use hand sanitizer. You got to wear a mask and use the hand sanitizer. And I walked out of such a store a few weeks ago. I'm willing to endure a mask for 5 minutes or so, but I'm not getting that goo on my hands every time I walk into a store. At the Confederation Central Public Library in Prince Edward Island, returned books are quarantined for 72 hours. In Toronto, the library system's COVID-19 protocol on its website requires that returned materials be set aside for 96 hours or more until they are safe to circulate. Every Loblaw banner store in Canada is still doing increased sanitation processes, including frequent deep cleaning of all areas of the store. In fact, we go above and beyond what was required, said Loblaw Director of Corporate Affairs Mark Boudreau, adding that some of the grocery chains' COVID-19 cleaning protocols might become permanent. Across Canada, individuals and institutions are maintaining the same deep cleaning and product quarantining protocols that came to be expected at the start of the pandemic. But experts, and the experts have changed their tune. How about that? Say that it's time to move past hygiene theater or cleaning behaviors that give people a sense of security and protection, but are actually unlikely to reduce the likelihood of COVID-19 transmission. And the environmental impact of disposable wipes, the cost of disinfecting supplies, and the burden on restaurant and retail employees to maintain strict COVID-19 cleaning measures are further reasons to start being pragmatic and stop wiping down groceries and mail. part of the problem that we're having, I think, as infectious disease doctors and virologists, is getting people to understand that simply knowing that a virus is present in something on a surface or an aerosol doesn't mean that that's an efficient way for the virus to get itself transmitted, because viruses undergo all kinds of changes that can affect its infectivity, its ability to bind to a receptor that is on a person that allows for infection, says Dr. Gerald Evans, Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control at Kingston Health Sciences Center and Queen's University professor. It's funny. I don't know what Dr. Gerald Evans had to say about this issue a year ago, but I know that all the other experts were determined to make us absolutely terrified of not only every other person on Earth, but every surface on Earth. I'm not hearing a lot of apologies from these people. Perhaps that will have to wait for a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. But the mask zealots, they're not giving up. This is from Rob Davidson at The Hill. Misinformation throws a wrench into self-imposed mask wearing. The CDC's recommendation that vaccinated Americans can now gather indoors unmasked has drawn flack because it relies on an honor system, which we can't fully trust. But that's not the fault of the CDC. It's the fault of those with platforms who somehow led Americans to stop believing in science and medicine. How many times are the scientists going to sheepishly reverse themselves on definitive statements they made about COVID-19 before they trot out this line that Americans are sinners because they have stopped believing in science and medicine? Remember when Dr. F talked about the bloodbath that would occur, when Texas opened up? There was no bloodbath. Did we get any apologies from him? As a physician, an American, and still recovering from the, wait for it, trauma of this ongoing pandemic, I can understand why so many are confused or concerned by the updated recommendations. We can't easily tell who's been vaccinated. In a pandemic-era Venn diagram, the intersection of the set showing people opposed to COVID-19 vaccines and the set of anti-maskers would be pretty large, because we're still a long way away from community immunity. Oh, by the way, the CDC surreptitiously changed its definition of what herd immunity means. Did you know that? Yeah, check it out. It's true. It's true. Yes, but irresponsible Americans who are just determined, to breathe normally. Okay, and roll out the vaccine passports. This is from Bloomberg. U.S. government officials monitoring the airways say they won't tolerate passengers who refuse to don masks as airline travel surges ahead of the summer season. A recent spike in unruly passenger reports, many of them involving people refusing to cover their faces, prompted Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas Tuesday to issue a stern warning to travelers. Well, the airlines have used COVID-19 as an excuse to be even shittier to their customers than they were previously. And then they, just go to the government and demand many billions of dollars to be bailed out. Maybe they could, experiment with a return to a high level of service. In the United Kingdom, Professor Lockdown, that would be the thoroughly discredited Neil Ferguson, warns tighter restrictions may be needed as the UK breaches a 3,000 case COVID cases for the first time in a month, with a spike of 18% in a week amid spread of Indian variant, but the deaths stay in single figures with 9 victims. Yeah, but it's never the wrong time for lockdowns. Even in Nova Scotia, which has suffered a catastrophic loss of population. In fact, on average, fewer than 2 a month since the epidemic began, and it has shut down the province entirely. Yeah, how about that? Isn't that the textbook definition of hysteria? Dominic Cummings, who is, well, he's bidding fair to be considered Britain's angriest man. Former top aide to Boris Johnson is making bombshell claims about the government's coronavirus response, namely the bizarre degree to which Johnson downplayed COVID-19 in the early part of 2020. And he claims that Johnson wanted to be injected with the coronavirus on live TV to show it wasn't a big deal. I find this, I am no fan, I hold no brief for Boris Johnson, but even I find this dubious. And, in Australia, which is long demonstrated Nova Scotia level of hysteria, COVID testing clinic chaos across Melbourne as thousands race to check if they're infected amid lockdown fears. Cars at testing center in Epping in Melbourne's north backed up for half an hour. By 11 a.m., that wait time had increased to 3 hours. Victoria's surprise outbreak stands at 15 cases after 11 new infections confirmed. 15 cases. 15 cases. Okay. So is that a lot of cases? I'm unsure about this. How many people live in the Australian state of Victoria? Is it, like 100? Something like that? Actually, no. It's 6.7 million people. 6.7 million people. Metal Mike says, how long will you be at that hotel, KMG? I do not know. I am paid up until the 24th of next month. After that, I can't say. Roulette Crack says, what I figured out about women in power is that none of them have a higher purpose. They are not big on legacy building. They are cave dwellers. They want the cave to be comfy. Bad Jew. Steve says, storm coming in, shutting down the computer later folks. Metal Mike says, you can always just bring the computer inside, Steve. Cecil Henry says, return material should be incinerated a la Fahrenheit 451. We have so much to learn from that book. Emma Nimpton says, too bad, Halifax is a neat city. Oh, people are complaining that the fellow Alejandro, or whatever his name is not actually Latino. Aslan says, as the famous Bach cantata says, Ich habe genug. I've had it. Okay. Aslan says, tired of women in government as well. Femme fatigue. Bonnie Henry wants a hug day in BC. My science minister would make an NKVD propagandist proud. Bonnie Henry announced, I believe yesterday, that BC will be back to normal by September. Of course, which is the beginning, close to the beginning, certainly in BC, of the cold and flu season. So we're going to be wearing masks again. No question about it. On the plus side, people in BC are now allowed to eat in restaurants and bars again. Hooray! Cecil Henry says the mattress has more credibility and is far less dangerous than the last 14 months of government help. Well, as someone commented on my comment, and that mattress has never taken a dime from pharma. Oh, okay. Someone complaining about the novel The Color Purple. That's Roulette Cracked. Okay. Let's get back to it here. And we will go to Lockdown Skeptics. I'm curious of what they have to say about Mad Bad Dom Cummings. UK records 3,000 COVID cases for the first time in a month, but deaths stay in single figures. Well, you notice you don't hear very much about deaths anymore. Now they just want to talk about cases. I wonder why that might be. Did you know that the flu didn't exist last year? And it doesn't exist this year? That is curious. Wouldn't you say? I certainly would. Live music venues beset by regulations, and not just ones imposed by the government. And I'm seeing a picture here of a young man wearing a mask while playing a saxophone. Audiences at Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club won't be dancing cheek to cheek anytime soon, with the famous London venue having introduced a raft of COVID protocols, some already required by the government, others not, including mask wearing, facial thermometers, and protective screens. Here's a list of new rules from their website. Face coverings must be worn when entering and leaving the venue or anytime you are not seated. Staff will wear face coverings. Upon entering the club, there will be an optional sanitizer station. Surfaces, remember? We were talking about them. And a facial thermometer, which you will be asked to use. All guests must scan the track and trace QR poster on arrival at the club. We have removed entrance furniture to ease congestion in and out of the venue. We have increased our cleaning system using medical-grade sanitizer on all surfaces. Again, not necessary, never was. We politely ask customers not to bring excessive baggage that needs to be checked into the cloakroom to ease congestion upon entering and leaving the club. Another example of what Kingsley Amis famously called the easier for them principle. Increased hand washing of staff and staff health declarations. We have gone cashless. Your PDQ machine will be cleaned between each use. Again, pointless. We have reduced capacity to 50% to allow for spacing between guests. We have adapted our air conditioning system to ensure there is 100% fresh air being circulated in the club. We have installed some protective screens in certain areas. Who on earth is going to want to go to that place? Department for Education is surprisingly resistant to investigating the failures in its COVID response, says new report. Matt Hancock should have been sacked for lying to everybody on multiple occasions, says Mad Bad Dominic Cummings. Let's see. Freddie Sayers writes in response, the central fantasy in the Cummings testimony is that he and a couple of brainiacs invented lockdown late in the night in number 10, bravely going against the consensus. In reality, it was simply the UK falling into line with the same policy as the rest of the Western world. Indeed, Nova Scotia. Oh, how come they get to have lockdowns and we don't? Aren't we important enough? How come the other premiers get to be dictators and I can't? Well, I'm going to be a dictator too. I'll show them how lockdowns are done. We're going to have the stiffest lockdown at any time in Canada when we've had fewer than 2 people a month dying from COVID-19. Marks and Spencer's annual profit slumps 88% during lockdowns, and the retailer plans to close more stores. LA Times publishes unconvincing defense of lockdowns and gets ratioed on Twitter. On May the 19th, the paper published a column entitled "The Evidence is Clear, COVID Lockdown Saved Lives Without Harming Economies." Without harming economies. They just lie openly. However, when it shared the article on Twitter, it ended up getting severely ratioed. As of this writing, the relevant tweet has 384 likes and 3.8 thousand comments, the vast majority of them critical. One of the popular replies says, tell that to the 100,000 people who lost their businesses, livelihood, and life's work. The user followed this up with, my bad, I mean 200,000, linking to an article in the Wall Street Journal. So what arguments did the LA Times columnist put forward? He begins by claiming that lockdowns played a significant role in reducing infection rates, and they had a very modest role in producing economic damage. He then argues that evidence for the propositions has been expertly confirmed by Noah Smith. Ho ho. Very satirical. Purple has been hijacked. What a sad fate for a noble color, says Aslan. We need mind sanitizer, says Aslan. Anyone still in Ontario needs to move south of the border to sanity, says Eminempton. Yes, I have to say that I'm a little surprised that British Columbia has an NDP, or sort of neo-socialist government, and the restrictions in British Columbia, for all I have complained about them, have been far less draconian and far less lunatic than those in the province of Ontario, or even in so-called ultra-conservative Alberta. Oh, hilariously ironic, says Oscar Toe, that we were able to told to trust the science when it's more likely now that science created the virus. Tricky Who says we've experienced a taste of what the Bolsheviks did to the Russian people, just a taste. Half Galician said Brits just went to Amazon, who took share from Marks and Spencer. Okay. And finally, on this subject, we will go as always to Alex Berenson, who is more and more vindicated. Of course, the skeptics about weapons of mass destruction, they were all vindicated. Were they rehabilitated? No, they were not. Were the people who had lied consistently about weapons of mass destruction, were they disgraced? Did they lose their jobs? Did they end up starving in gutters? No, they did not. They went from strength to strength. Berenson writes, this just in, reporting is racist. The CDC and the public health experts insist that post-vaccine myocarditis cases in young people are occurring at normal background rates. This is false. I normally give myself wriggle room, but the data are unequivocal. They are not telling the truth. The best data we have come from Connecticut, where 18 cases were reported as of May 24th, all of whom were hospitalized. The state called them 16 to 34, but the hospitals reported them as under 30. Connecticut reported around 240,000 fully vaccinated people under 30 as of May 19th. If one half of the vaccinated were men, who are far more likely to get this, that's a rate of 1 in 6,700 men. Now, you can play with the numbers to get the ratio down as low as 1 in 5,000 or as high as 1 in 15,000 if you like. But even 1 in 15,000 is far worse than background rate. Finding good numbers is hard, but this peer-reviewed 2004 paper, which looks at myocarditis in soldiers following a smallpox vaccine, reports a background rate of 2.2 cases per month for 100,000 soldiers. The Connecticut rate is 7 times that. Yesterday, reports out of Israel put the number even higher. Israel is worried enough it is now considering giving teens only the first dose of the Pfizer shot. Oh, yes, vaccinations of children in Canada. Guess what? No parental consent is necessary. No parental consent is necessary. Canada, of course, becomes more dictatorial with each passing day, it seems. And I was talking about a woman who no one had ever heard of until, I don't know, a few days ago, called Sasha Johnson, with the Black Panther of Oxford. She was shot at a party in the Peckham neighborhood in London on Saturday or Sunday morning at 3 a.m. And her people, she has her own political party for Black people, were very upset because the Metropolitan Police said that it appears that Johnson was not herself being targeted. And there's more evidence to back this up. 5 held over Sasha Johnson's attempted murder. Police arrest 4 drug dealers, then detain 5th man following car chase 3 days after BLM activist was shot in head during melee at Peckham party. 5 men, aged between 17 and 28, remain in custody on suspicion of attempted murder. Sarah Johnson's political party continues to reject idea the Black Panther of Oxford was caught in crossfire. Group reveal car was broken into 4 weeks before shooting, and thieves stole megaphone used at protests. The Daily Mail has a picture of this. I think this is obviously a fake story. Who would go to the trouble of smashing a car windshield and deciding to steal what's inside the car and stealing just a megaphone and leaving everything else alone? The megaphone is obviously symbolic. This woman was many times seen with a megaphone, and this seems to me obviously faked up picture and police report is meant to explain just how important Sasha Johnson was and just how, the man or whoever are afraid of her. 2 men and 3 teenagers, all black, have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder in connection to the shooting of Sasha Johnson. The Met says the 5 suspects, aged between 17 and 28, were all arrested yesterday as part of a police operation by the force's Violent Suppression Unit and will remain in custody. So it would appear this is this happens a lot in England now. Typically, it's with knives and not with pistols, but this sort of thing happens in the United States all the time. Some sort of gang beef or imagined gang beef, and someone empties a pistol into a crowd. And if you're going to do it that way, the likelihood is that, a lot of people are going to survive, So how did Portland celebrate St. George Floyd Day? It's from Lee Brown in the New York Post. Riot erupts in Portland on anniversary of George Floyd's murder. Oh no, more of this dreaded framing. Yes, linguistics analysis would have a heyday with this. What are you calling a riot? Oh, there's even more incendiary, pun not intended, footage, video in the New York Post story. Ooh, yes, something is on fire here. Militant protesters marked the anniversary of George Floyd's murder with yet another riot in Portland, Oregon, smashing up local businesses and trying to burn down the city's Justice Center. More than 200 rioters, most fully clad in black and many wearing gas masks, trashed the troubled City of Roses soon after a peaceful march ended late Tuesday, according to the Portland Police Bureau. Some of the mob tried to torch the Multnomah County Justice Center by pushing flaming dumpsters against the building, as at least 2 people tried to pry open the doors and get inside. The force said people chanted to burn the building down, noting how many used umbrellas to hide their illegal activities. People threw frozen water bottles, glass bottles, eggs, and metal spikes at officers and fired mortar-style fireworks at officers. When the fire was out and the firefighters got safely away, officers deployed smoke, then left the area. Mostly peaceful protest. Again from the New York Post, this time from Samuel Chamberlain. Oh, look, here's a tweet from the United States State Department, quoting the President of the United States, "I can't breathe. Those were George Floyd's last words. We cannot let them die with him. We have to keep hearing them. We must not turn away. We cannot turn away." Hashtag Black Lives Matters. And there's some video. American embassies across the world marked the anniversary of Floyd's murder by prominently displaying the Black Lives Matter flag. In Athens, the flag was hanged in such a manner that it covered the official U.S. embassy seal. We raised this banner in honor of George Floyd, murdered 1 year ago, in solidarity with people around the globe seeking a world without racial discrimination and a future with equal opportunity for all, read a post from the embassy's official account. Similar displays took place at American embassies in Madrid and Sarajevo, while U.S. Ambassador to Cambodia, Patrick Murphy, tweeted an image of the flag on the fencing surrounding the embassy in Phnom Penh. Yes. And we have a supposedly iconic image. I'm assured that it is iconic, and when the regime media tells me that an image is iconic, well, then it becomes so. And it is a Marine in dress uniform holding open a door for George Floyd's daughter. That would be the daughter from his second family, not from his first family. Humorously, after Floyd had become the most famous person in America, George Floyd's first wife and the mother of his first 2 children called them into the living room and pointed at the television set and said, "Do you know who that man is?" And the children said, "No." And the mother said, "That's your father." I wonder if they got a White House invite. And more in universal mental retardation news. According to President Biden, George Floyd's daughter, Gianna, threw her arms around me, gave me a big hug, and wanted to sit in my lap. "My wife would kill me. We gave her some ice cream. She had some Cheetos. And I think she had some chocolate milk. I'm surprised he didn't give the calorie content. Oh, yeah. And here's a piece from Vice, which is pretty much the journalistic arm of Antifa. What if we just stopped calling the cops? Asks Emma Ackerman. I want to get a look at this woman. You can physiognomy is real, as they say. And it is real. Okay. Not much there. Okay, so here's what this piece is arguing. Crime would largely disappear if people just stopped calling the cops, that the police accomplish little or nothing. And in fact, they ruin more than they accomplish. So it's not just communities of color anymore. White people are now occasionally rethinking whether it's a good idea to rely so heavily on law enforcement, especially if summoning the police could potentially harm someone. Yeah. So we have a bunch of stories of what would appear to be very strange people. Very strange people indeed. We have, being a Karen, a white woman who calls the cops on a black bird watcher for telling her to leash a dog, a black driver for temporarily parking in a reserved spot, or a black neighbor following a permit dispute has also become more of a concern in the past year. So Vice talked to some white people too, including strange woman called Marie Reimers, a white 28-year-old legal aid attorney. She was at home in Detroit on March 23rd when her dog started barking and going berserk. She tried not to overthink it. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe it was directed at the cat, she thought. But Reimer slowly realized it wasn't her imagination. An intruder had broken in, and calling the police for help wasn't an option. Police scare Reimers more than any home intruder could. Officials severely beat her when she was working as a legal observer at a racial justice protest in the city last summer. Oh, really? Is that what happened? So where's her multi-million-dollar settlement? I don't believe this happened. Involving the cops goes against her politics too, she said. So as an unknown person wandered around her first floor, Reimers barricaded her bedroom door on the second and started to text friends to let them know what was going on. And for reasons she still can't explain, she also posted about what was happening on Twitter. There is currently someone robbing my house. I am upstairs safe and fine, but not sure what to do. I was hoping they would just leave. They haven't. She added, if any of you call the cops, I will murder you. This certainly seems like a normal, sensible, not insane woman. And, oh yes, Jeff Bezos. Shock news from CNBC. Jeff Bezos to formally step down as Amazon CEO on July the 5th. Andy Jassy to take over. We chose that date because it's sentimental for me. The day Amazon was incorporated in 1994, exactly 27 years ago, Bezos said Wednesday at Amazon's annual shareholder meeting, which was held virtually. Amazon announced in February that Bezos would leave his post later this year. He will transition to executive chairman of Amazon's board and is expected to dedicate more time toward initiatives like the Bezos Earth Fund, his Blue Origin spaceship company, the Washington Post, and the Amazon Day One Fund. I've heard a fellow I knew who I used to work with who later went into the corporate world and rose to a fairly high position. I remember him, the shock news was that the CEO of an electricity company, actually a telephone company, TELUS, that he was resigning. And then everyone found out that he was going to remain executive chairman. And they thought, well, he's still going to be in charge. Are we supposed to pretend that he's just going to sit at his corner office and not interfere in everything that's going on? So I don't know. It would appear that Bezos is still in charge. And of course, Amazon is buying MGM. And of course, in buying MGM, they also get United Artists, which is the famous film company that was founded about 100 years ago by, the most famous people in Hollywood, including D.W. Griffith, Charles Chaplin, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks. And United Artists produced the James Bond films, so Jeff Bezos is going to own them. I already have the Blu-rays, but if you don't, I'll just remind you that there are many, many, many problematic scenes and expressions in the James Bond films. And the whole of the one set in The Man with the Golden Gun, expect these things to be bowdlerized in short order. And in an amazing coincidence, Amazon is acquiring MGM and its vast film and TV library for $8.5 million, while the U.S. Senate gives the tech giant a $10 billion handout. A Senate committee voted to give Amazon $10 billion, reports Brendan Boucher at the Post Millennium, for redundancy in its space exploration program. I don't know what that means. Senator Josh Hawley, an opponent of big tech monopolization and censorship, called out the sale, saying that Amazon, quote, is already a monopoly platform that owns e-commerce, shipping, groceries, and the cloud, unquote. They shouldn't be permitted to buy anything else, period. Stephen Colbert, what an ugly man he is. What an ugly, ugly, ugly man he is. He has his own hypothesis as to why Jeff Bezos bought MGM, because it will mean that he then owns The Apprentice, including the infamous tapes that allegedly showed Donald Trump making racist comments. Oh, yes. An ex-actor, Tom Arnold, was more famous for being married to Roseanne Barr. He claims that this is true. But of course, the media for years has been lying about Trump again and again and again and again. And they believe, with considerable justification, that the more they repeat the lies, for instance, him praising KKKers in Charlottesville, people will come to believe it. And when they are called out on their lies, they refused to back down. Let's see, Colbert is still hoping Amazon can release the most racist thing in the MGM catalog other than Gone with the Wind. And this is what counts for joke on late night television. I wanted to talk about a woman who I mentioned previously in this space called Size E Cup. And she is one of America's leading conservatives. Yes, indeed. And she has a perch at CNN, and she has a video. She makes videos. SE Cup, Size E Cup, Unfiltered. Here's her latest one. Florida yearbook incident teaches girls wrong lessons about their bodies. CNN's SE Cup explains how incidents like the Florida altered yearbook photos controversy send girls and young women the wrong message about body positivity and self-confidence. So what do you think the chances are that this is going to be SE Cup moaning about her miserable life? Do you think that's a strong possibility? On yearbooks, she writes on Twitter, TikTok and raising confident young girls, my latest. So what happened in Florida was that a high school there digitally altered photographs of girls that were thought to be too revealing, too provocative. And a bunch of them and parents complained. The school apologized, and they made available refunds on the yearbooks. The school has a policy, a dress code policy, in which provocative clothing is not permitted. So Size E Cup, actually this this essay, this video essay, could accurately be titled, "I had a hot body in high school, but prudes wouldn't let me flaunt it." And what now, 30 years later, or at least 25 years later, yeah, more like 30, she is still bent out of shape about something that happened to her in high school. So she begins by telling us that she loves TikTok. She loves TikTok. You know why? She's a mom, but she's a cool mom. She actually uses that phrase. And she tries to, the people at CNN who she says are Jurassic, they just don't get it. They don't get TikTok. TikTok is a marvel, according to Size E Cup. It's just full of so much talent and so much body positivity, including the dancing of a body positivist woman who I'm guessing is certainly exceedingly overweight and probably not white. But it's just so inspiring. And you know why it's so inspiring to Size E Cup? Well, she shows a picture of herself at the age of 13 or 14. And she is wearing a long winter coat. And she's wearing sort of a loose sweater. And she said, "I had to look like this all the way through high school." See, she's humble bragging. She's had big breasts from an early age. And her whole public image is based on her big breasts, which are admittedly impressive, and her librarian glasses. And in one photo, a publicity photo, which she was using a couple of years ago, she seriously resembles a barely sentient blow-up sex doll. But she had to keep covered up all the time, except that she says that she's posing in front of the theater where she performed ballet. Well, she wasn't performing ballet in those clothes, was she? Ballet dancers, they dance in tights, which are exceedingly revealing. So what she's saying about being covered up all the time is not true. It's simply not true. Of course, Size E Cup has more than made up for the oppression she suffered from prudes. She says that she has a child, and that how her child dresses at school is none of the school's business. Yeah, one of America's leading conservative intellectuals speaks. If they want to be sexy, well, then good for them. And people say that the boys can't concentrate. Well, that's their problem, isn't it? This woman is in her 40s. And these are the things that are important to her. I don't reckon her daughter's chances, if her daughter grows up watching TikTok, because the whole purpose of TikTok seems to be the creation of virtual whores. So let's have a final look at the chat. Okay, hyper-individualism is stupid. We live as social beings, says Aslan. Gamma Yen says, amazing to have lived 40 years and to have remained this clueless. Don Willis says, Letterman binge watching is still a thing for me. Guilty pleasure. I liked Letterman a lot when he was on NBC. Then when he moved to CBS, I didn't like it so much because he was playing in a much, much bigger theater, and you need much grander gestures. Also, it seemed that Letterman got increasingly bitter. He just became a nasty old man. When he was on NBC, his act, that Krusty the Clown is based on David Letterman. One of the Simpsons writers admitted that in the early 90s. Well, when Letterman was on NBC, I'd ask myself, and I'm sure lots of other people did, is this his real personality? Is it just an act? And then the longer that he was at CBS, the more it was clear that it was not an act. Not at all. His behavior over the Jay Leno, I thought was absolutely shameful. Oh, he didn't get to be the host of Tonight Show. Yeah, I could just imagine being in a similar situation. And, oh, yeah, you hear that sound coming up your drive? Oh, what's that? It's a dump truck full of money, your money. You're going to earn $25 million a year. We're going to renovate a historic theater for you, just for you. We are going to give you ownership of your show, and we're going to invite you to submit pilots to NBC with your company Worldwide Pants, one of which is Everyone Loves Raymond, which probably made Letterman as much money as he made working for NBC. And yet he never stopped bitching. It was painful to watch. Okay. I've never seen much Carlson, but I watched a lot of Letterman, says Goose. Carlson, well, late night talk shows were different then. They often had guests on simply because they were interesting and not because they had something to sell. Carlson seemed to get rather bitter as well. I mean, Carlson was originally on for 90 minutes, for the first 10 or 15 years. It was cut down to 60 minutes, and people said, he took Fridays off, he took a number of weeks of vacation, but doing what, the 8,497th, number of the Tonight Show, I can just imagine how wearying that could get. Aslan said disciplining one's wife was expected in the old country, even in public, and woe to anyone stupid enough to intervene. Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. On Thursday, tomorrow, which is Theater Thursday, I will be discussing a noir. How do you know it's a noir? Because it doesn't have a happy ending. I don't think I'm giving anything away there. If you tell people it's a noir, it's like Bugs Bunny said about the opera. You're expecting a happy ending? It's called The Friends of Eddie Coyle, starring Robert Mitchum and Peter Boyle and Richard Jordan, and it is exceedingly well done indeed. And on the book club on Friday, I'm going to be talking about John Chapman's Cultured Grugs. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you'd click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which would be exceedingly well appreciated at this, shall we say, uncertain time of my recently peripatetic life, my PayPal account is connected to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, donations can be made directly to this live stream through Interact at kevingrace@shaw.ca. As always, Rusha's book coming up 2-3 weeks, something like that. As always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.